Welcome to the Natural Wisdom Podcast. I'm Christine Backus, your host. This is the beginning of the fourth season of the Natural Wisdom Podcast. It started early July of 2021, and now we're starting into our fourth year, which is pretty exciting. I guess a lot of podcasts don't last that long. So yay for you who are listening, who are keeping this going, because it's not much fun doing a podcast if nobody listens to it. So thank you so much for being here, and I appreciate you hanging in there. And today I'd like to return to the roots of the Natural Wisdom Podcast and talk a little bit about a topic that is at the heart of why I started the podcast in the first place. And that is the topic of remembering yourself as part of nature and belonging to the earth community, the nature community. And when I talk about nature, I mean not only what we have been sort of taught to think of as nature, the plants and animals around us, but and the earth and the whole earth ecosystem, but the whole cosmos really, because we're all an inseparable part of this whole natural world that includes the planets and the stars and the galaxies and out as far as we can imagine and see and beyond. And so I want to start with a little bit of a story because I had the great pleasure of being at a women's retreat last Sunday at a ranch in the heart of Montana, which also happened to be in the heart of grizzly country. And the retreat was outdoors in a beautiful manicured lawn area, but we were surrounded by nature. There's nothing else around but this ranch. And we did several workshops, and one of them was one that I had the great fortune to co-lead with one of the retreat organizers. And it was just a walk in the wilds. And we looked at plants and we connected with the wilderness and we sort of connected with the land. And one of the reasons I was able to take part as leading one of the leaders of this walk was that somebody else had had to drop out, partly because of the threat of the grizzly bears. The grizzly bears are fairly active right now this year in the area. And this other person had some concerns. And I wanted to step in and try to find a safe way to give people a connection to the area, the land, and just the whole experience of it. So we did that. And we started a little bit by talking about fear. And I will tell you that I believe we've been conditioned to fear so much of nature and so much of the wild. If you've been, maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't. I mean, I've even heard people say that they were taught that wild strawberries are poisonous. And I can guarantee you they're not, because I usually eat as many as I can when I'm out there. And I know most people do that as well. But that's just an example of how many ways that we're told that those things out there can kill us. And certainly there are poisonous plants and grizzly bears can kill us, but it's more about the programming that leads us into sort of meeting nature with fear. And I want to talk today about some life lessons that I've learned from the wilderness. And I'll finish my story about the walk out there. But I want to talk about some life lessons that I've learned from being out in the wilds by myself a lot over the last 10 to 15 years. So let me start by this story. So we did go out. We actually had we were accompanied by three of the women that worked at the retreat center at the branch. And they came with us. They carried their bear spray and they agreed to be kind of on the lookout for us. And they were the ones that knew the area and knew what was safe and how we should be out there to be respectful, right? That's going to be one of the lessons I want to talk about being respectful. And so it turned into a wonderful experience because we got a little ways into the forest, out of sight of the ranch, the main ranch buildings, but not too far off, just partly because we didn't have time. And we spent some time simply standing and meditating and feeling what was around us, connecting on a more subtle level with what was around us. And so let me tell you now, what the lessons are that I shared on this walk, and which we practiced and which you can do as well, whether you're out in the wilderness, whether you're with other people or not, or even just in your backyard or somewhere else that has nature around you. So anywhere that you can connect with nature, even if it's just your house plants, you can practice these lessons. So one of the first things that I kind of have learned, I will say, is to be, when I'm out, especially if I'm out by myself and I know I'm in bear country or where there's animals that I don't want to have conflict with, and that could be moose, bear, elk, even deer. There are probably other things, mountain lions, but mountain lions tend to leave you alone, usually. One of the first things I've learned is to be fully present, to be completely inhabiting your space and yourself. And what that means is, on a very superficial level, having all of your senses engaged with nature, with your environment, where you are, not walking around with earbuds, listening to music while you're in the wilderness, because especially when you're connecting and well, especially when you're connecting in a place like that and really trying to sink into feeling like you belong, you want to be all there. And if you're worried about animals, for instance, one of the primary senses we use to find out what's going on around us is our sense of hearing. And if you start to tune in and you start to hone your sense of smell, you can smell them. So all of your senses can be engaged, and you can be alive throughout your body and all of your senses. You can notice which way the wind is coming from. You can notice any temperature shifts when you move from one part of the forest to another. Obviously, I think we're very reliant on our sense of sight, most of us, and this culture is very reliant on the sense of sight, which is why we have so many imaging machines in the medical world, for instance, because we want to see everything. We've sort of lost touch with our more intuitive senses. But so there's that five senses, that using your being fully present in all of your five senses. And then there's also the subtle senses, right? Many people, I have not had this experience, but many people will recount an experience when they knew there was a lion around because they felt the hairs on the back of their neck lifting. And there's just a sense, and animals, for instance, can tell when you're looking at them. Even if they don't see you, they just know. And you can experiment with this. You can probably even experiment this with your pets, but you can definitely experiment with this with birds and squirrels and other things. They know when you're looking at them. And you know as well. It's just, again, we're a little bit out of practice in our world. And then the last piece of this being fully present is to have the sense and the knowledge that you belong. Even if you're just visiting, if you can walk through your neighbors in the city, you can walk through your neighbor's neighborhood and have the sense that it's okay for you to be there in most places, right? Maybe some places it's hard to feel that way. But just like that, we can visit parts of nature, and so long as you understand that you belong to the earth community, that's one of the ways that you kind of let the animals know you're there and what your intentions are, and let the forest know why you're there and what your intentions are. So it's that sense of belonging, and also kind of the attitude, right? Your attitude of, and we're going to talk a little bit more about respect and appreciation, but your attitude counts in terms of how you're walking through the woods and how you are experiencing and being a part of the natural world. And again, this is all applicable to your daily life as well. Be fully present, and that's a way of communicating with the world, the cosmos, and with people around you, just of and by itself. So the second lesson is mind your own business. And I know that sounds a little odd, maybe a little bit blunt, but especially again in nature, if you're walking around in bear country or moose country or elk country, one of the worst things you can do is run across one of these animals and stare at them and focus your attention and then start going into the fear mode or the aggression mode or whatever it is. We are predators, right? As human beings, we might not feel like predators, but we are predators, and the way that we behave often comes across as predatory, and staring is predatory. You won't, yeah, staring is predatory. So minding your own business also means allowing these other creatures to do their own thing and to be focused on your own business at the same time you're aware of what's going on around you. So you're being fully present and fully aware, but you're also kind of staying in your own lane, if you will, in terms of why you're out there. It gets a little tricky if you're out on a photography mission, for instance. Obviously, if you're hunting, that's a completely different attitude. And then you're minding your own business, but you're also truly being a predator in that case. But minding your own business, and again, this is something you can experiment with. If you're ever around deer or even birds and squirrels, sometimes you'll find this too. If you see one and you don't look at it, or you look at it out of kind of your peripheral vision, you'll find that sometimes they just don't care about you. They ignore you because you're ignoring them. And this has been something that's happened for me many times with bears. If I run into a bear, and well, if I run into, I mean, come around a corner and there's one 30 or 40 feet in front of me, I don't look at it directly. I will look at it out of the side of my peripheral vision. And generally they're doing the same thing. That's what I've found, is they're generally doing the same thing. So that's lesson 2, is mind your own business. And then I don't challenge them. Some people do, and some people win. I don't challenge them. I usually just go find a different route, which is, if you think about it, what animals typically do if they meet each other in the woods. And of course, they're going to sense each other much more quickly than we do, again, because we're generally so reliant on vision. So that's lesson 2, mind your own business. Lesson 3, and this one I learned on a particular occasion I can tell you about. I was coming back to the family cabin from a walk on a bunch of game trails. And I came down the hill through this big meadow that I could see from the yard of the cabin. And I didn't see any animals. In fact, I think on that whole walk, I didn't see any animals. I knew they were around because I'd seen their signs, but I didn't run into them or see them or even hear them. And about 10 minutes after I walked down through that meadow and I got back down to my yard, I looked back up the hill and there was a bear grazing in the exact spot I had just walked down the hill. And this is maybe about 10 minutes apart. And I thought that was interesting, but and in and of itself, because obviously the bear had known I was there and it just sort of waited for me to get out of the way before it went into the meadow. And then later that same evening, I noticed a deer, or several deer maybe, in that same part of the meadow, and the bear was gone. And so it caught me thinking about this sort of lesson number 3, which is share, right? Share space. We can take turns in the space. And that's what the animals do. You'll often see, if you observe the same piece of ground over time, a certain kind of animal at a certain time of day, or in this case, like I say, it was me and then the bear and then the deer. In that same meadow, I've seen moose and then I've seen elk. They're the only time I've seen them at the same time, there was a little bit of a stare down and one of them had to give. Right. But that's what typically you'll find, is that animals have learned how to share. They know where they want to be, but they also know that if somebody else is there, they go at their time. And of course, there's a little bit of an order right? The two animals I saw in conflict once were an elk and a moose, both bulls. And the elk came in from the top and the moose kind of ambled up from the bottom. The elk stopped and stared at the moose. The moose pretty much ignored the elk. They were both about the same size, it looked like to me. But the elk finally turned tail and decided that he was ceding the ground to the moose for then. And again, this was a more extreme version of taking turns, but they share the space, right? There was no big conflict. Nobody got in a fight. It's just that one decided that it was time to wait for the other to be finished. And so sharing, and I think there's a lot of people that have bumper stickers that say coexist. To me, this is the ultimate in coexistence. And it's what we can do with other wild creatures and what we need to learn to do better with all the other inhabitants of the earth, because we tend to go in and sort of kick everybody else out, right? That's what we tend to do as humans, but we can share. And that was my third lesson. And then the last is sort of the last lesson I have from the wilds, from the wilderness, is appreciation. And when I talk about appreciation, I mean, it also includes reverence and respect. And what I get the sense of when I'm out with nature, whether it's a house plant or really it's everything. It's not just what we consider nature, it's everything around us. Is the best thing we can do for anything and anyone is to appreciate them as they are, which is exactly what we want ourselves, right? It's just simple appreciation for us as we are. And that's what I've mostly learned that from, is looking at trees and plants and when I connect, thinking what do I have to offer a tree besides the biochemical things that we're taught about, the CO2 and that sort of exchange, that physical exchange of breath. And I think appreciation is what we have to offer anything and everyone around us. And appreciation also involves respect. So for instance, when I'm thinking about the big animals that I come across, it sort of goes back to minding your own business. That if you grab your camera out and start to try to take pictures or focus on them or chase them down because you think they're cool and you want to watch them, that's not very respectful, right? We wouldn't want people to do that to us. We wouldn't want a bear to do to us. In fact, when a bear charges, that's what they're doing. And most people don't like being charged with bears. In fact, I haven't ever heard of anybody that likes it, because the bear is being very aggressive and it's trying to figure out what you are and if you're a threat. And when you chase something around with a camera or follow it or stare at, even if you're just following it with your vision, you're in a way exhibiting that same energy of charging them, and again, not minding your own business. In the bear's case, it's a defensive move, especially if they have young ones. They're trying to figure out if you're a threat, and that's how they do it, is get very aggressive and get close to you so that they can figure out what you are. And so that appreciation and respect is one of the most significant lessons I think that we can take from the wilds and from nature about how to treat everything and everyone. And my sense is that the creatures in the forest, the creatures in the mountains do that for each other, even if there's a predator-prey relationship. In fact, we had an elk die in the yard this year. It was about 100 feet from the cabin. And I guarantee you there's nothing left of that animal. Even the bones were pretty much chewed down. And that's a form of appreciation, right? Appreciation that there's another creature that might not have voluntarily given its life. It was sick. It died through an illness. But the other animals appreciated it and utilized it in a way that returned it in a sense back to its source, right? That all the animals, all of us are part of this great cycle of life, and that was part of how it happened. So appreciation, respect, and that to me is a bit of involves reverence and honor as well. I think the other thing I want to say too is that close observation, when you really, and maybe this is part of the appreciation, when you really pay attention to something and try to forget what you know, what you think you know, what you've been told about it, and whether that's a grizzly bear or a bear that you've been told is dangerous, and you just really pay attention to what does it really do? How does it really behave? What is your actual experience with it? But even in the case of a tree, for instance, I remember a tree that I had in the yard when I lived in Portland, Oregon. And just kind of paying attention to that tree over time, it started to make me realize that our definition and what we think we know about a tree is so limited versus what it really is. That tree was a home to squirrels and birds. It was a resting place. It fed things, right? It fed the animals through its cones. You can't separate the tree from the air around it, the ground underneath it, the animals that move through and around and in and on it. And that's the other, maybe this is just a part of the appreciation piece is not thinking we know something, not thinking once we name it, we understand it, because we don't, right? Everything, including you and I, are far more vast and far more complex and far more rich than just the surface appearance. And so that's maybe the last piece of this life lesson of nature, of appreciation. So I'm going to end there. And this is just a quick little episode that I wanted to come in and sort of, as I say, kind of return to our roots, as remembering that we belong in this world. We belong on this earth. We are an indispensable part of this ecosystem of nature and of the natural world. And I hope that those lessons resonate with you and that you play with them. Be fully present and have a sense of belonging. Mind your own business. Share, learn to share, and then appreciate, respect, honor. Thanks so much for listening to the Natural Wisdom Podcast. I'll be back soon with another episode, and I appreciate you being here.